Mocap, or motion capture. The technology is complex, but the concept is simple. A bodysuit with several nodes placed in precise points to track the movement of the body. A real actor of flesh and blood whose actions are transposed to a digital double in a fantasy land. You move, they move. You smile, they smile. This technology seems like the exclusive plaything of Hollywood corporations and big budget blockbusters, but what if you could bring it to a place like Lansing, Michigan, and give life to a local filmmaker's imagination? Well, that's actually exactly what happened. This year, I teamed up with the Lansing-based motion capture studio Haptix Studio to develop a 5-minute pre-visualization short film based on one of my screenplays. That's right, my stories, my characters, played by actors, recorded by mocap, and turned into a final animated short film. Needless to say, this was the coolest project I've ever worked on. I'm gonna show you the project's progression, from concepts to sketches to 3D characters to performances to rough draft and finally to a pitch-ready final product. But first, as with everything, it began with an idea. Big Red follows the story of an antisocial scientist as he tries to build a self-sustainable submarine to explore the oceans in. I've had the idea for Big Red for over 5 years now, but it was only at the beginning of this year that I felt I was finally ready to sit down and write the screenplay. In November, I'll be releasing a video documenting the entire screenwriting process for the 3-hour film, but for now, let's pretend that the 5-minute screenplay we're working on kind of just, crystallized out of thin air. All right, with that out of the way, let's set the scene. It's February, I'm taking a tour of Haptix Studios' new facilities in Lansing. I'm walking around saying stuff like, John and I sit down, we start chatting, and he tells me that Haptix Studios is looking for a filmmaker who can write, cast, and direct a 5-minute previs film. A few weeks later, I pitch my script and my vision to the Haptix team, and they welcome me with words of encouragement and a lot of ideas of their own. But I know some of you are wondering, what is previs? It's short for pre-visualization, and it's the name of the game in today's industry. You don't just make a film, you start with a rough draft in the form of an animated previs film.
One of the best things that you can use previs for is being able to show potential investors, producers, or anyone else who's going to work on the final version exactly what you were trying to convey and really get a good idea of what it's going to look like. Just the ability to really set up a draft and move it to completion with a smaller crew, a smaller budget, and still get something really special and unique.
Even though this isn't a traditional film project, it still demands the same type of workflow as traditional film. First, we'll start with pre-production, where we prepared all of the models, assets, and all of the essential pieces of the project. Then we'll move on to production, where we'll record the actors' motion capture performances. We'll finish the film in the post-production phase, where we'll program the shots, edit the film, add the sound effects, the score, the credits, and now that you've been fully debriefed, let's begin pre-production. To realize this story in a 3D project, we're gonna need character models and environments for them to act in. And on top of that, we're gonna need a storyboard so we can start visualizing the shots that are gonna be in the final product. I passed on my mood boards, and while Billy got to work on the environment, Darius got to work on the character models. Starting with his initial sketches, we began the back and forth of notes and changes until the characters were ready to move to the 3D world. As you can expect, creating life from nothing is far from simple work.
There's a lot of steps to making all the characters. There's a whole pipeline of things you have to do in order to get just one character finished.
Darius sculpted the characters, created the clothes from scratch, and carried the models through a pipeline of programs, all resulting in a final character ready to be acted and ready to be appreciated by their proud creator.
It feels pretty good. So I spent a lot of time making them, so it's good to see all that hard work be put into motion.
Back in Unreal Engine, Billy was hard at work creating the environments. First, he's gonna start with a rough blockout.
I like to start out with a blockout where basically I'll take some basic shapes like cube, a cylinder, different spheres and stuff like that, and just arrange them and get the basics of how the scene's gonna look. At first, it kind of, just looks very basic, but as you progress, it starts to really look, once it starts to look a lot like the idea you have in your mind, it's really satisfying, and it definitely makes you feel proud of yourself because it's cool to see how you started with something where it's just, a bunch of blocks, and then you kind of to turn that into a city, jungle, mountain scene, whatever.
We had fully realized characters, and now we had a convincing world for them to exist in. The great thing about 3D filmmaking is that in addition to the environments being highly convincing, they're also extremely flexible and remove a lot of the problems that make traditional filmmaking so difficult. Let's take lighting as an example. Right now, I'm shooting my narration in a room that's approximately the same size as Big Red's laboratory. I'm using 1, 2, 3 different lights to get something that looks decent. On a bigger film set, this number would be much larger, and each of those lights would take time to set up, position, diffuse, brighten, or whatever it takes to get the light looking just right. And this is all just for one setup, and if I want to move to the other side of the room, I need to move everything over. This is one of the reasons why filmmaking is such a time-consuming process, and one of the reasons why pre-visualization exists. In a program like Unreal Engine, moving a light is as easy as this. You can hide a light source inside an object like a lamp, you can make it completely invisible to the viewer, you can change the reflectivity of any surface, you can do anything. And as Billy likes to say, with software like this,
You can really kind of just break physics.
the same is true of the camera, which instead of being a massive cinema camera, you have Unreal's digital cameras, which you can visualize like this, but in reality they're invisible, and you can move them anywhere you like with virtually zero restriction. As a director, I can show every corner in every angle of the room without showing the lights or breaking the illusion. This gave me a tremendous amount of freedom as we started blocking the scene. Blocking actors' movements is one of the most essential skills, essential processes in traditional film, in theater, and in any other visual medium. And blocking varies greatly between these mediums. In theater, you block the actors in reference to how the audience will see them. In film, you block the actors in reference to how the camera will see them. When you're dealing with motion capture and 3D environments, the rules of blocking are notably different, but let's get to that later. For now, I need to show you our version of the stage. Let me introduce you to the volume, or the capture space. This 30 by 30 foot space is not just a stage, it's a scientist's workshop, or a beach, or a quaint city street. In other words, it's the portal to the digital world. In May, I suited up and got into the volume to roughly block out the scenes so that Billy could have a reference for how big to make the 3D environments and where to place the major props. For example, each of these squares is about 1 meter long. I blocked off 4 of them for the width and length of Big Red's workshop, meaning the space translates roughly to 4 by 4 meters in the 3D environment. Shout out to Michael Scruggs for coming over to the Haptix Studio and helping block out these scenes. Michael's been working on River Magnus projects for a couple years now, and he's always a great person to have on set. Thanks, Michael. So I don't like my actors to do anything that I haven't done myself, so this day kind of doubled as a way for me to get in a suit, see what it feels like, look a little silly, and get a sense of what seeing myself doubled in a 3D environment feels like. After I got a rough block out of the scene with Michael, I put together a shot sheet, made some environment diagrams, and sent them to Teddy so he could draw the storyboards, which have been a staple of film production for decades and still hold a place in our kind of production for good reason.
Storyboarding brings many benefits to projects like this. For one, storyboarding gives all the actors and the director an idea of what the shot will look like before filming. I also think it helps with blocking, pacing of the shoot.
Teddy's work on the storyboards was the first step to visualizing what the end product would look like, and gives me a really useful reference point as we transition to the motion capture phase. In July, we finally returned to the volume with the actors to rehearse and record their performances. At the beginning of each day, the actors suited up, and Leah and the rest of the Haptix team would begin the predetermined, intricate placement of several nodes. The movement of these silvery spheres is captured by the volume's several infrared cameras and controls the movement of digital anchor points on a digital mannequin. The team is careful to place them in the perfect position for the clearest data possible. The actors put on a face capture headset with a mounted smartphone that will record their facial performances. Once they've suited up, they enter the volume and Leah runs them through an aerobic routine, a range of motions to get the nodes collaborated as Paul watches out for any glaring issues in the models. Once we get the thumbs up, the actors and I return to the familiar routine of rehearsing, refining, and recording their performances. Of course, with an added feeling of excitement and newness.
Mocap is totally different than anything I've ever done. This is my first time doing it. Throwing on the suit, first of all, it makes you kind of feel like a superhero, or maybe like a bobsled driver, one or the other. And then they lace you all up, all this stuff, they get it all perfect. And when you see yourself on the screen for the first time, it's like, It's like being in a video game.
It's something I haven't experienced before, and it's something I haven't done before. So it's all around just very different, but it's really, really fun. It really just seeing the technology of all of it and watching them calibrate everything and all of my exact movements with my fingertips and everything coming to life on that character.
On the first day of rehearsal, I get to use the virtual camera system, or VCS, which allows me to move the virtual camera around a 3D environment. With Teddy's storyboards in hand, I test out the shots in real time. While I won't be filming with this quote-unquote camera, it allows me to feel like I'm in the space and allows me to block the actor's movements more effectively. With the VCS added to the list of previs techniques, I have a pretty good idea of how the scenes are gonna look at this point. After 2 rehearsals, it's time for the shoot day. But this shoot day feels a lot different than usual. I don't have the lingering anxiety that it will start storming because the digital street is always sunny. I don't have to worry about a stranger walking into frame because our Unreal Engine overlord, Billy, controls the movements of anything that exists in this world. At this point, I feel confident in the actors' performances and in the flow of communication we've developed with the Haptix team. In mocap, you're not just capturing footage as in film, you're capturing data about the movement of an arm or a torso or a pair of eyes. Now, I gotta be honest, directing mocap was a lot harder than I initially expected it to be. On a traditional film set, you have one monitor to look at. What's on the frame is what you get. But with motion capture, you're capturing the face cam, the suit data, the prop data, and you're programming the camera all separately. I started out with my eyes glued to the monitors and trying to look at all these 4 different reference points and trying to composite this image of what they would all look like all together in my mind. But at the end of the day, what winded up being the most useful was just going back to my theater directing days, standing a couple feet from the actors and watching their performances. Because with the quality of modern motion capture technology, the actors' performances are pretty much one-to-one transposed onto the 3D characters. Oh yeah, special thanks to Ian Carroll for capturing the behind-the-scenes footage. My videographers dropped out last minute, but a friend recommended Ian to me. I met him the day of the shoot and he got some great footage, and we've worked together on several projects ever since. Thanks, Ian. Ignore the Band-Aid. Thanks, Ian. Anyway, Heidi and Calvin delivered a solid performance, and the next phase began. After the initial shoot, the data was now in the hands of Leah and Paul, and the arduous process of retargeting began. Their task was to take the data from Heidi and Calvin's performances and move it or retarget it to the character models. After I spent some time selecting the best takes, they cleaned up any glitches and refined the characters' movements, which was a time-consuming but vital process.
A lot of people don't understand everything that goes into it, so to fully do all of the fine-tuning and the retarget and to see it on the final character, it's sort of a long road, so it's really satisfying to see it in kind of like a previs in a project in the context of a movie is also really cool to me.
In September, the Haptix team passed the Unreal files and the motion capture data over to me, and I began the really exciting and extremely exhausting, but mostly really exciting process of programming the digital cameras and rendering the frames. That's right, if you thought we had a finished film at this point, think again. What I had at this point was data. At this point, the characters were moving around a 3D space on a set timeline, and I had the freedom to capture their performances however I pleased. This is basically a director's ultimate dream. And apparently my computer's ultimate nightmare, because this is what it sounded like for basically a month straight. But anyway, the way this works in Unreal is that you create a camera, choose its settings, and literally program its movement through time. Say I want the camera to start here, hit this mark halfway through the shot, and finish right here. It takes these 3 points and an algorithm fills in all of the frames in between. That's why blocking is different with motion capture. You can give the actor a boundary to stay within and have a general idea of where the camera will be, but you can literally program the camera around the performance that they've delivered. We agreed that Haptix should render the final frames because... And once I got the final frames, I brought them into good old Premiere Pro, cleaned up the transitions, and carried out all the usual post-production stuff. Sound effects, sound design, composing the score, and finally rendering the final film. With technology like this in Lansing, the streets of my fictional Mediterranean city can take one step closer to becoming a reality. Special thanks to the Haptix team for being so accommodating and helping bring my vision to life. You can watch the full 5-minute previs film right now on this channel, and make sure to subscribe so you can support the channel and help us on our journey to making a full feature film. Thanks for watching.